Hi, my name is John Farrell, and I am an attorney at the Farrell Law Firm in Marietta, Georgia, and author of Estate Planning for the Modern Family. Estate Planning for the Modern Family is a step-by-step guide to wills, trusts, and powers of attorney here in Georgia. It's about 150 pages of helpful information as you plan your estate here in Georgia. But what I want to talk to you today is about whether a will needs to be notarized here in Georgia. And I get this question from time to time. And the short answer to that is no, a will does not have to be notarized. But you do want to keep a notary handy when you sign a will for something else that comes along with the will. And I'll explain a little bit about that in just a few moments. But there are essentially a few elements when it comes to having a valid will here in Georgia. One of the first things is you need to make sure that the person who's making the will, we call this person the testator, they have to be at least 14 years old here in Georgia. Georgia happens to have the lowest age in the United States when it comes to being able to make a valid will. Very interesting. Somebody who can't obtain a learner's permit to drive can make a valid will here in Georgia. Second is that they must be of sound mind. Generally, this means they haven't been officially declared incompetent by a court. Third, the will must be written. Oral wills are not valid in Georgia. I've have other videos, and you'll be able to see the link in the description below about written wills here in Georgia. They can be typed or handwritten, but oral wills are not valid here in Georgia. Another thing is that the will must be signed by the testator, the person who's making the will. They have to put their signature to it. And finally, the will must be signed by two witnesses. Now, there's a lot of other little nuances along the way when it comes to having a valid will, but those are the big five right there. As an example, the witnesses themselves have to be over 14. But those are essentially the five things that make a valid will here. So as you can see, you don't need a notary in this process when making a valid will, but you do need a notary handy, and that is because of another document that typically goes along with a will, but not always, but it needs to, and it's called the self-proving affidavit. You see, back in the old days when somebody passed away, we would have to bring the witnesses into the courthouse to have them testify. Yeah, hey, I was there that day. I saw them sign the will, and that's their signature. But we estate planning attorneys learned that sometimes witnesses would die themselves. Maybe they'd move away and you wouldn't be able to find them. So a document called the self-proving affidavit was created to prevent having to go find the witness years later when the person who made the will passed away. That affidavit essentially says the same thing, which is, hey, we were there that day. The testator was of sound mind. They were over 14, and we saw them sign it, and we ourselves are over 14. And then the testator will sign the affidavit, the witnesses will sign the affidavit, and then that document is notarized. So you don't need a notary for the will, but you do need a notary for the self-proving affidavit. I can't tell you how many times people come into my office with the original of a will and they're just very thankful, and then you'll find that there's no self-proving affidavit attached to it. And so we go through this process of trying to find the witnesses. Again, sometimes they have moved on, sometimes they have passed away themselves, and it becomes very difficult. So while you do not need a notary for a will here in Georgia, you do need a notary for the self-proving affidavit, and you absolutely want to have a self-proving affidavit with every will that is created. It just makes things much smoother on the family when that day comes. So again, if there's anything that we can assist you with when it comes to these types of questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our information is contained right here in the last slide of the video, and we would be glad to assist you with any of your estate planning needs.